My daughter called me an embarrassment. At a party in the beautiful condominium I bought for her, she banished me to my room so I wouldn't ruin the aesthetic. She and her husband thought I was just a frail old woman they could hide away. They forgot who held the deed, and they never imagined my revenge would arrive in a moving truck. Before I begin, thank you for being here, for being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, you are in the right place. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. My name is Aaliyah, and I have the honor of narrating the story of a beautiful, resilient woman. Now let me tell you what they did to her. My name is Lena Washington, and at 69 years old, I had become a master of the art of invisibility. It was a skill I had never intended to learn. For 40 years, I had been a chief archivist for the city, a woman whose life was defined by order, by history, by the quiet, tangible weight of documented truth. My world was one of facts, of records, of things that could not be easily erased. But in my own home, in the beautiful sun-drenched condominium that my own money had bought, I was slowly, systematically being erased. After my dear husband Robert passed away 3 years ago, the large family home we had shared felt too big, too silent, a museum of a life that was over. My daughter, Simone, and her husband, Reginald, were living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, struggling to keep up with the demands of their ambitious careers and even more ambitious social lives. So I had made a decision from a place of pure, uncomplicated motherly love. I sold my home, the repository of my entire adult life, and used a significant 6-figure portion of the proceeds to purchase a magnificent 3-bedroom condominium in one of the city's most prestigious buildings. It was a gift, I thought, a foundation for their future, but my lawyer, a wise old friend of Robert's, had insisted on a small measure of prudence. Lena, he had said, a gift of this magnitude needs a safety net. Let the deed remain solely in your name. Let them live there, rent-free for as long as you wish. But you, my dear, must always hold the keys to your own kingdom. And so it was done. The deed, a crisp, powerful document, listed me, Lena Washington, as the sole legal owner. I moved into the 2nd bedroom, a lovely, sunlit space, and gave my daughter and her husband the master suite. I thought we were building a new kind of family, a multi-generational haven of love and support. I had no idea I was simply providing a more elegant stage for their cruelty. Simone, my daughter of 42, was a successful public relations executive, a woman whose entire life was a carefully curated performance of success. She saw the world not as a place to live, but as a backdrop for her social media feed. And I, her simple, quiet, old-fashioned mother, was a blemish on her perfect brand. Their disrespect was a slow, creeping poison. It wasn't in loud arguments, but in the quiet, daily dismissals that chipped away at my soul. Last month, Simone had hosted a small luncheon for some of her influencer friends. I had spent the morning preparing my famous lemon pound cake, a recipe passed down from my own mother, thinking it would be a lovely personal touch. As I brought it into the dining room, Simone intercepted me, her smile as tight as a drum. "Oh, Mama, that's sweet," she'd said, her eyes flicking nervously towards her friends. "But it doesn't really fit the aesthetic of the tablescape. And besides," she'd added in a stage whisper, "it's not gluten-free. We're trying to be conscious of everyone's dietary needs." She had taken the cake from my hands and whisked it away to the kitchen, where it remained untouched, a symbol of my outdated, unaspirational love. Reginald, her husband, was her willing, silent accomplice. A man who worked in finance, he understood the numbers better than anyone. He knew that my rent-free presence, combined with the pension I quietly contributed to the household account, was a massive financial subsidy that enabled their entire lifestyle. But he was a weak man, a man who loved the comfort his wife's ambition afforded him, and he was more than willing to trade his mother-in-law's dignity for a quiet, peaceful life. His contribution to my daily humiliation was one of profound, weary sighs. If I asked him to help me reach a heavy box from a high shelf, he would do it, but with a dramatic put upon groan, as if the effort were a monumental trial. "Here you go, Lena," he'd say, his breath heavy with martyrdom. I was not sensitive, I was observant. I saw the way they looked at me as if I were a piece of inherited furniture they couldn't quite figure out how to dispose of. I saw the way their love was a performance, a show, a filial duty they put on when they needed something from me. My signature on a school form for my grandson, my quiet, unpaid babysitting services when they had a last-minute gala to attend. I endured it all. I made myself smaller, quieter, more invisible. I retreated to my room, my sanctuary, a small island of my own history in the vast, cold ocean of their modern lives. I told myself it was for the best. I was keeping the peace. I was a guest in their home, after all, a home I had bought, a fact they seemed to have so completely, so conveniently forgotten. But their arrogance grew with each passing day. They had become so accustomed to my quiet compliance that they had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten that the quiet archivist, the keeper of records, the woman who understood the power of a legal document, was still very much alive, still very much watching, still very much in possession of the one document that held their entire fraudulent world in its grasp, the deed. And they were about to give me a reason to finally devastatingly use it. The party was to be the pinnacle of Simone's social year, a lavish, catered affair to celebrate her husband Reginald's recent promotion to junior partner at his accounting firm. For weeks, our beautiful, quiet condominium was transformed into a chaotic command center. Designers, florists, and caterers moved through the space with an air of self-importance, all under the imperious, exacting direction of my daughter. She was not just hosting a party, she was producing a theatrical event, a showcase designed to cement their status as one of the city's rising power couples. I, of course, was expected to be a silent, invisible stagehand in this production. My role was to stay out of the way, to make myself as small as possible, to not disrupt the perfect aspirational vibe she was so desperately trying to create. The day of the party, the air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and simmering anxiety. Simone was a whirlwind of stressed, frantic energy, snapping at the catering staff, rearranging floral arrangements with a furious precision. I had spent the morning in my own room, reading, the quiet turning of my book's pages a small act of rebellion against the chaos outside my door. As the afternoon wore on, I emerged to get a glass of water. The living room had been transformed. My comfortable, well-loved furniture, my armchair, the one Robert had always sat in, the small table that held our family photos, had been banished, replaced by sleek, modern rental pieces that looked like they belonged in a museum of discomfort. My family photos, the tangible records of my life, were gone, replaced by large, generic, abstract art prints that were cold and meaningless. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a sterile, impersonal event space, a stage for a play in which I had no part. I could hear Simone in the dining room, speaking with her influencer friends who had arrived early to help. Their voices were a chorus of vapid, self-congratulatory chatter. "Oh, Simone, this is divine," one of them chirped. "Your taste is just impeccable. How do you do it all?" "It takes a village," Simone had replied with a laugh that held no warmth, only a sharp, brittle pride. Simone saw me in the kitchen, and her face, already tight with stress, hardened into a mask of pure, undisguised annoyance. She strode over to me, her movements sharp, her expensive silk dress rustling with an angry energy. "Mama," she began, her voice a low, urgent hiss. "What are you doing out here? The guests will be arriving in an hour." "I was just getting a glass of water, dear," I said quietly. "Well, get it and go back to your room," she snapped, "and stay there, I mean it." She looked me up and down, my simple, clean house dress, my comfortable slippers, and her lip curled with a faint sneer of disgust. "You're embarrassing," she said, the words a quiet, vicious slap. "Stay in your room. When my friends come over, your stories are old, your clothes are dated. It's just better this way. We can't have you ruining the aesthetic." The cruelty of it, the sheer, breathtaking audacity of it, stole the very air from my lungs. She was not just asking me to be discreet. She was banishing me, imprisoning me in my own room, in my own home, because my very presence, my age, my simple dignity was an embarrassment to her. Her husband, Reginald, walked in then, a bottle of champagne in his hand. He saw the scene, my shocked, wounded face, his wife's furious one. He just stood there, a silent, spineless coward, his gaze flicking nervously between us before he turned and busied himself with polishing the champagne flutes. His silence was his consent. I looked at my daughter, at her beautiful, cruel face, and I saw a stranger, a woman so consumed by her own shallow ambitions that she was willing to sacrifice her own mother's dignity for the sake of a perfect party. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange, glacial calm, the kind that precedes a terrible, cleansing storm, settled over me. I turned and walked back to my room, my back ramrod straight, my head held high. I closed the door behind me, the sound a quiet, definitive click. For the next 5 hours, I sat in my armchair and listened to the sounds of their success, the cheerful chatter of their guests, the clinking of glasses, the smooth, sophisticated melodies of the jazz trio they had hired. Later, I heard a knock on my door. It was one of the catering staff, a young woman with kind, pitying eyes, holding a small plate with a few picked-over appetizers. "Your daughter said to bring this to you, ma'am," she'd whispered. I took the plate, my hand steady, and thanked her. I did not eat the food. I just sat there in my silent room, a prisoner at a party I had paid for, and I let my heartbreak cool, harden, and sharpen into a cold, clear, and unshakable resolve. They had banished me. They had called me an embarrassment. They had locked me away so as not to spoil their perfect evening. They had no idea that in the quiet of my room, I was not weeping. I was planning. The retired archivist, the keeper of records, was about to pull a very old, very powerful, and very, very binding document from her files. The party downstairs was just a prelude. My own main event was about to begin. The profound humiliation of being banished to my room, of being treated like a shameful secret in the very home my life savings had purchased, did not break me. It awakened me. The years of quiet endurance, of swallowing my pride, of making myself small for the sake of my daughter's fragile ego were over. The dormant, methodical archivist within me, the woman who had spent a lifetime organizing facts and preserving truths, had been called out of retirement, and her first case was the fraudulent entitled life of her own daughter. The morning after the party, the house was a disaster of stale champagne and wilted flowers. Simone and Reginald slept late, nursing their hangovers. I, however, was up at dawn, my mind clear and sharp, my purpose absolute. I did not scream. I did not argue. I began my quiet, meticulous research. My first stop was the old metal lockbox I kept hidden in the back of my closet. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, beneath my late husband's military medals and my own birth certificate, was the one document that truly mattered. I pulled it out, the heavy official paper, a comforting weight in my hands. The original deed to this condominium. I spread it out on my small desk and looked at the picture of Robert on my nightstand. "Oh, Robert," I whispered to his smiling face. "You always told me this paper was my fortress, my final say. You always said to protect our legacy. I never thought I'd have to use it to defend myself against our own child, but she has left me no choice. She has forgotten what family means. She has forgotten what sacrifice means. And most of all, she has forgotten who owns this house. I will not let her tarnish what we built." My heartbreak in that moment turned into the cold, methodical fury of a woman with a mission. I read the deed again, my eyes tracing the clear, unambiguous legal language. Grantee, Lena Washington, a single woman. My ownership was sole, absolute, and unassailable. Their names were nowhere on it. From a legal standpoint, they were nothing more than long-term, non-paying tenants. Squatters in designer clothes. The knowledge was a shot of pure, invigorating power. I had the law on my side. I had the truth. My next step was to understand the full scope of my asset. I made a discreet phone call to my old friend Harriet, a sharp, successful real estate agent I had known for over 30 years. The call was a full emotional scene. "Harriet," I began, my voice quiet but shaking with a suppressed rage. "It's Lena, honey, what is it? You sound terrible," she said, her voice full of immediate concern. I told her everything, the move, the financial support, the constant disrespect, and finally the ultimate humiliation of being banished to my room like a servant during the party. "She called me an embarrassment, Harriet," I said, the words still tasting like poison. "In my own home that I bought for her." There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard Harriet let out a low, furious hiss. "That ungrateful little—" "Oh, honey, no, we are not letting that stand. That is not just disrespect. That is a declaration of war. We are not just selling this condo. We are going to perform a surgical extraction of your life from their greedy hands. What do you need? Her righteous anger on my behalf was a balm to my soul. It validated my feelings and solidified my resolve. I need a quiet, off-the-books market valuation for my property, I said, and I need it yesterday. Consider it done, she promised. Harriet called me back the next afternoon, her voice a low, excited whistle. Lena, she said, are you sitting down? The valuation came in. The market in your neighborhood is on fire. Your condo, it's worth nearly double what you paid for it. It's a staggering number. She told me the figure, a number so large it made my breath catch in my throat. That staggering number was the final piece of my plan. This wasn't just my home anymore. It was a significant financial asset they were waiting to inherit. My plan was simple, elegant, and utterly devastating. I would sell the apartment without telling them. I gave Harriet my instructions. I want to sell, Harriet, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. A discreet, private listing, no for sale sign. Show it only to your most serious, pre-qualified, all-cash buyers. And I want a quick closing. Harriet laughed, a low, appreciative sound. Oh, Lena, she said, you are a far more dangerous woman than anyone gives you credit for. Consider it done. The trap was set. The embarrassing old woman was about to make a move so bold, so final, that it would change their lives forever. They had banished me to my room. They had no idea I was about to sell the entire house right out from under their feet. The weeks that followed my phone call with Harriet were a masterclass in covert operations, a quiet, tense period of my own personal espionage conducted from the confines of my guest room. I was a spy in my own home, my every action, every word, a carefully calibrated performance of the meek, slightly confused old woman they believed me to be. I would shuffle through the house, my expression placid, my movements slow, all while my mind was a whirlwind of strategic planning and cold, satisfying fury. Harriet, my brilliant realtor friend, was true to her word. She handled the sale with a level of discretion and speed that was breathtaking. She created a private, password-protected online listing, sharing it only with a select group of high net worth clients from her personal network who were looking for investment properties and prized off-market deals. There was no public listing to alert my nosy neighbors, no for sale sign on the lawn to catch the eye of my arrogant daughter. The entire transaction was conducted in the shadows, a ghost of a deal happening right under their noses. The single crucial showing of the condominium was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon, a time I knew with absolute certainty that Simone and Reginald would both be at work. I had arranged it with Harriet under the pretext of having a deep cleaning service come to the house, an excuse Simone had readily accepted with a condescending, well, it's about time. The tension that day was almost unbearable. I sat in my room, my ear pressed to the door, listening to the quiet, professional murmur of Harriet's voice as she gave a tour of the home I was secretly selling. I heard the potential buyers admiring the high ceilings, the stunning city views. It was a strange, out-of-body experience, being a silent, invisible party to the dismantling of my own life and theirs. At one point, Reginald came home unexpectedly to retrieve a file, and my heart nearly stopped. I had to quickly create a distraction, feigning a dizzy spell and calling out for a glass of water, keeping him occupied in my small suite, while Harriet quietly ushered the buyers out the front door. It was a close call that left my nerves frayed, but my resolve hardened. That evening, Harriet called with the news. The buyers, a quiet, elegant-looking doctor and his lawyer wife, had been completely charmed. They had made a full-price, all-cash offer on the spot. No contingencies, Harriet had whispered triumphantly over the phone. They want to close in 10 days. It's a dream scenario. Accept it, I had replied, my heart pounding with a thrilling, terrifying sense of power. And Harriet, I added, not a word to anyone, especially not to the current occupants. While the legal paperwork for the sale was being drawn up, I continued my performance. I endured Simone's daily slights, Reginald's passive-aggressive sighs with a new secret smile playing on my lips. They were so consumed by their own self-importance, so convinced of my powerlessness, that they were completely oblivious to the ticking time bomb beneath their feet. They would talk openly in front of me about their future plans for my condominium. We should really do something about this kitchen, Reggie, Simone would say, her nose wrinkled in distaste. It's so traditional. I'm thinking Italian marble, a sub-zero fridge. And this guest room, Reginald would add, gesturing towards my own small sanctuary, would make a perfect home gym. I would just nod along, a quiet, agreeable old woman, all the while knowing that their grand renovation plans were a fantasy, that in a matter of days, they would not be renovating, but packing. The closing was scheduled for a Friday at a title company downtown. I took a taxi, my movements a secret, my purpose, a quiet, thrilling hum in my veins. I signed the papers with a steady, confident hand. My signature, the one they had so often dismissed, now the most powerful instrument in the room. A certified check for a life-altering sum of money was placed in my hand. It was done. The condominium, the beautiful sun-drenched stage for my daily humiliation, was no longer mine. It now belonged to a lovely young couple who, I was sure, would fill it with a warmth and a respect it had not known in years. I had Harriet arrange for the new owners to begin their move in the very next day, a Saturday. I knew Simone and Reginald would be home. I wanted them to be there. I wanted them to witness the quiet, logistical, and utterly devastating unraveling of their world. My revenge was not going to be a confrontation. It was going to be a moving truck they had not ordered, filled with the belongings of strangers who now held the deed to their home. The fuse was lit. The bomb was set to go off at precisely 9 o'clock the next morning. And I, from the quiet, comfortable vantage point of a small cafe just down the street, would have a front row seat to the most satisfying show of my entire life. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect, beautiful day for an eviction. I was at my post by 8:30, seated at a small table at a sidewalk cafe just down the street from my old condominium building. A cup of steaming coffee sat untouched before me, a newspaper open on the table as a prop. I was not reading. I was watching, waiting. My heart was a calm, steady drum, the quiet, rhythmic beat of a justice that was long overdue. The entire scene felt like a slow-motion thriller, a final, cinematic act of my own making. At precisely 9 o'clock, it arrived. A large, formidable moving truck, its diesel engine a low, powerful rumble in the quiet morning air. It pulled up directly in front of the building's elegant facade, its sheer size a declaration of intent. I watched as the new owners, the young doctor and his lawyer wife, the Chens, got out of their car, their faces full of the happy, nervous excitement of moving day. The neighbors, out for their morning walks with their small dogs, slowed their pace, their curiosity piqued by the unexpected commotion. They knew Simone and Reginald weren't moving. The first sign of chaos from my old apartment came a few minutes later. The blinds on the living room window, which had been closed, were suddenly violently snapped open. I could just make out the silhouette of my daughter Simone, peering down at the moving truck, her posture a rigid line of confusion and annoyance. I could almost hear her irritated sigh from across the street, the sound of her perfect Saturday being disrupted. The real fireworks began when the moving crew, efficient and professional, began to unload the first pieces of furniture onto the sidewalk, a beautiful modern crib, a large, comfortable-looking sofa, boxes labeled kitchen and master bedroom. The front door to the building flew open, and Simone stormed out, her husband Reginald scurrying behind her like a frightened squire. She was dressed in an expensive silk robe, her hair a mess, her face a mask of furious disbelief. She marched directly up to the moving crew foreman, a large, patient-looking man. "What do you think you are doing?" she shrieked, her voice a shrill, ugly thing that carried across the quiet street, causing several neighbors to stop and stare openly. "This is a private residence. You have the wrong address. Get this junk off my curb." The foreman just looked at her calmly, then at his clipboard. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a tired, seen-it-all rumble. "My work order says apartment 12B for the new owners, Mr. and Mrs. Chin." "The new owners?" Simone repeated, her laugh a high, hysterical sound. "That's impossible. We are the owners. This is our home." It was then that the new owners themselves, the Chens, approached, their own faces now a mixture of confusion and concern. "I'm sorry," Dr. Chen said politely. "Is there a problem? We are the new owners of 12B. We closed on the property yesterday." "You did what?" Reginald finally found his voice, a weak, sputtering thing. That's not possible." We didn't sell the apartment. Mrs. Chen, the lawyer, a woman who clearly did not suffer fools, just looked at them, her expression one of cold, dawning comprehension. She reached into her briefcase and produced a single crisp, beautiful document. She held it out for them to see. It was the legally executed closing statement and the new deed, her and her husband's names clearly, officially printed upon it. I watched from my cafe table as my daughter and son-in-law stared at the document, their faces turning from furious denial to ashen, horrified disbelief. The truth, the impossible, catastrophic truth, was finally crashing down upon them. It was then that Simone's phone came out. I saw her frantically stabbing at the screen, her face a mask of pure, panicked rage. A moment later, my own phone, which I'd placed on the table beside my coffee cup, began to buzz. I let it buzz. Once, twice, 3 times. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. I let the sound of her panic be the soundtrack to my quiet victory. Then, on the 4th ring, I answered, my voice a calm, serene, and utterly devastating purr. "Hello, Simone, dear. Is something the matter?" "Mama!" She shrieked into the phone, her voice a raw, ragged sound of a cornered animal. "What is happening? There are people here with a moving truck. They have a deed. They say they own our apartment. What did you do?" I took another sip of my coffee. "I did what you told me to do, my love," I replied, my voice as sweet as poison. "You said I was an embarrassment. You told me to stay in my room. I decided you were right. My presence was clearly a burden on your perfect life. So..." I paused, savoring the final, beautiful checkmate. "I have given you the whole place to yourselves by selling it to someone else." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute, profound. It was the sound of a life imploding. It was the sound of my own, quiet and utterly complete victory. I hung up the phone on my daughter's stunned, horrified silence. From my vantage point at the sidewalk cafe, I had a front row seat to the final, pathetic acts of their domestic tragedy. I watched as Simone, her face a mask of utter devastation, slid down the wall of the building's elegant lobby, her phone clattering from her numb fingers. I watched as Reginald, my son-in-law, a man who had always been so full of bluster and arrogance, just stood there, his mouth agape, his world completely, irrevocably shattered. The new owners, the Chens, were kind but firm. They had a legal right to be there, and the movers were on the clock. The chaos continued, a slow, methodical, and deeply satisfying dismantling of the life my daughter and her husband had taken for granted. Their furniture was moved aside, their perfect, curated world invaded by the boxes and belongings of strangers. The police were eventually called, not by me, but by the building's doorman, who was trying to manage the escalating confrontation. 2 officers arrived, listened patiently to Simone's hysterical, rambling claims, looked at the official deed presented by Mrs. Chen, and then calmly, professionally informed my daughter and her husband that they were in fact trespassing and that they had 1 hour to remove their personal effects before they would be forcibly escorted from the premises. The final image I have of them is one I will carry with me always. It was a picture of 2 people, utterly, completely defeated, sitting on the curb amidst a pathetic pile of their designer luggage, their world reduced to a few hastily packed boxes. As the new family, a family full of hope and new beginnings, began to move into the home that was no longer theirs, I watched as they had an explosive, whispered argument, their gestures full of blame and recrimination. Their perfect partnership had crumbled under the first real pressure it had ever faced. They were now homeless, surrounded by their expensive, useless things, a direct visual consequence of their actions. My revenge was complete. It had been a quiet, logistical, and devastatingly effective maneuver. I had not screamed, I had not cried, I had simply sold the apartment. The weeks that followed were a quiet joy. I used the substantial proceeds from the sale to buy my own, smaller but far more peaceful condominium in a different part of the city. My new home was a sanctuary. It was filled not with expensive rental furniture, but with my own cherished pieces that had been in storage. My husband Robert's armchair sat by the window, which overlooked a park filled with old, wise oak trees. The air smelt of lemon polish and my own baking, not the artificial scent of Simone's ambitions. It was a space that was entirely, unequivocally mine. I heard, through the grapevine, of their downfall. Unable to afford the city and with their reputations and their social circle in tatters, they were forced to move to a small, bleak rental apartment in a distant suburb. Reginald, I was told, had lost his promotion. Simone's influencer career had vanished overnight, her social media a ghost town of her own making. Their perfect life had been exposed as a hollow, fraudulent sham. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel glee. I felt a profound, quiet, and deeply satisfying sense of peace. One afternoon, about a month after I had settled into my new home, I sat on my sunny balcony, a cup of tea in my hand, and I thought about what I had done. I had been called an embarrassment, a burden, a woman who should be hidden away in her room. But I had proven them wrong. I had proven that a quiet woman is not a weak one. I had proven that a mother's love, when betrayed, can transform into a force of nature. And I had proven that the owner of the deed is and always will be the one who holds all the power, where they had wanted me to stay in my room. Instead, I had taken the entire house. My revenge was not just in their loss. It was in my own quiet, dignified, and unbreakable freedom. My final thought was not of them, but of the new life I was building. I had spent my life as an archivist, preserving the stories of others. Now, finally, I was free to write my own, and this chapter I knew would be the best one yet.